Spartans didn't feast. They endured. And this wasn't soup. It was war in a bowl. Before Leonidas and his 300-faced death at Thermopylae, they trained for it by drinking Melas Zomos, a black broth so savage, ancient warriors said it tasted like death itself. Modern chefs spit it out, historians flinch at it. But for Spartans, it was fuel, it was grit, it was survival in liquid form. And today, we're digging up the brutal truth behind the warrior dish that separated men from mortals. In the ancient city-state of Sparta, where boys were torn from their mothers at 7, where pain was praise and weakness was a curse. The warriors who'd one day stand shoulder to shoulder with King Leonidas were forged not just in battle, but in the barracks of discipline. And what did they eat? Not banquets, not honeyed lamb or roasted figs like the Athenians. No, they ate Melas Zomos, a black, blood-thickened broth so brutal that even visiting generals from other Greek states refused to swallow it. But to a Spartan, this was a rite of passage. A daily reminder that softness was death and endurance was everything. So what was in it? Why was it feared? And what made this dish the heartbeat of the most feared warriors of the ancient world? Today, we go deep into the iron stomach of Sparta. To understand why the Spartans ate what they ate, you first have to understand what they became. At the age of 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families and tossed into the agoge, a brutal, state-run military training system designed not to educate, but to break, strip, and rebuild. There were no lullabies, no lull in the pain. They were whipped for mistakes, starved to teach resourcefulness, taught to steal, and punished only if they got caught. Because for a Spartan, failure was worse than theft. Meals? Sparse, gruel, sometimes just a piece of barley bread or a handful of olives. Hunger wasn't an inconvenience, it was a training tool. Imagine this. You're a boy, freezing at night in a thin cloak, belly growling louder than your war chant. You steal a fox cub to eat and let it tear your gut open from inside your tunic just so no one sees your weakness. That story, not legend, it's a historical tale from Plutarch. The pain wasn't the punishment, it was the proving ground. So when these boys finally earned the rank of soldier, when they sat shoulder to shoulder with men carved from iron and leather, they didn't expect feasts. They expected Melas Zomos, a dish as brutal and stripped down as they were. A soup of pig's blood, salt, vinegar, and boiled pork, as black as the night before a battle. It wasn't food for pleasure. It was fuel for war. The Spartan warrior didn't eat for comfort, he ate for unity. And that unity began in a place more sacred than the temple, the Syssitia. Every Spartan warrior belonged to a mess group, a brotherhood of 15 men who ate together, trained together, and died together. It wasn't just dinner, it was a daily act of discipline, respect, and submission to the state. No silver platters, no wine goblets clinking in celebration, just one pot, one ladle, one law. Eat like a soldier or leave like a coward. And the centerpiece? Melas Zomos, literally, black broth. A pitch-black soup made of boiled pork, vinegar, salt, and pig's blood. Yeah, blood. It looked like something dredged from a battlefield and tasted like iron-soaked fury. One visiting non-Spartan reportedly gagged after tasting it and said, "Now I understand why Spartans have no fear of death. They've eaten this." But for Spartans, it was sacred. It tasted like brotherhood, like shared pain, like earned survival. The more bitter the broth, the stronger the bond. And you couldn't just show up and eat it. You had to be voted in unanimously by your messmates. One no vote, you were out. No soup, no seat, no brotherhood. Imagine sitting in silence, staring across firelight at the men who would shield your left flank in battle. If one of you breaks, you all die. That's what the black broth symbolized. It wasn't dinner, it was a promise. To fight, to bleed, to win, together. When the horn sounded and shields slammed, Spartans didn't pray for safety. They ate for death. Forget protein shakes. Forget calorie counts. Before a march into hell, a Spartan's last meal wasn't crafted for taste, it was for carnage. According to ancient sources, warriors consumed a final, gut-punching meal. Barley bread, boiled pork, olives, and of course, more Melas Zomos. Why? Because it stuck in your gut like steel. This wasn't brunch, it was ritual preparation. Because when you went to battle, you weren't eating again. You were either returning a hero, or getting dragged back on your shield. No forks, no knives, just bare hands. Rip, tear, swallow, march. Spartans didn't need finesse, they needed fire in the belly. And during campaigns, forget campfire cuisine. The Spartan diet on the move was as raw as their warfare. Grain cakes, onions, dried meat hacked into strips and salted until it could crack teeth. They didn't even boil water if they didn't have to. Boiling was for poets. Real men drank stream water as is, unfiltered, the taste of risk, the taste of war. Your guts weren't pampered, they were trained, like the rest of you, to endure. One wrong step on the battlefield and your entrails would decorate the grass. So your stomach better be ready to hold the line. That's what their food did. It didn't coddle, it tempered. Because if your food's too soft, you will be too. You think Spartans didn't celebrate? Oh, they did, but only after they earned it. After victory, after the clash of iron and the silence of the fallen, Spartans didn't throw lavish banquets like the Persians. There were no silver platters, no dancing girls, no lazy indulgence. No, their feasts were earned in blood. Picture this, the surviving warriors circle a blazing fire. The scent of roasting meat, boar, goat, even wild deer fills the cold air. Not a word spoken, only the crack of bones, the sizzle of fat, and the sting of wine on split lips. These weren't parties. They were rituals of dominance. The meat, charred, simple, cut straight from the carcass and shared with bare hands. They cooked with nothing but fire and instinct, no spices, no sauces. Flavors came from the hunt, the smoke, and the burn. And yes, wine flowed, but only to honor the dead, not to dull the senses. Drunkenness was for the weak. Spartans drank to remember, not to forget. Even in triumph, there was no softness. Food wasn't a distraction, it was a reminder. You live. He dies. Eat. Train. Repeat. And the next morning, back to Melas Zomos, back to discipline. Because comfort is the first step toward collapse. No leftovers, no gluttony. Victory wasn't permission to be soft. It was a brief reward, then straight back to the grindstone. You don't become immortalized at Thermopylae by feasting like a king. You do it by eating like a warrior, even in victory.
Ready your breakfast and eat hearty. But tonight, we dine in hell!
When warriors met at Thermopylae, it wasn't just spears that collided. It was philosophies of life, strength, and food. While Spartan warriors trained on black broth, wild game, and grit, their enemies, the Persians, marched with caravans of luxury. Imagine this. Rows of camels hauling casks of wine, sacks of saffron, nuts, dried fruits, candied rose petals. Silken tents filled with honey-roasted lamb, seasoned fish, yogurt sauces, flatbreads stuffed with herbs, figs, pistachios. The Persians didn't travel light. They brought their entire empire's kitchen with them. Xerxes didn't feed his army like soldiers. He fed them like princes. There were feasts before battle, wine flowing like rivers, golden goblets, chefs and servants by the dozen. Flavor was the Persian flex. Luxury was their weapon of morale. But Spartans, they didn't need morale. They had purpose. They had hunger. They had Melas Zomos. One pot, one spoon, one mission: survive, fight, win. Where Persian meals were long and indulgent, Spartan meals were short, sharp, and earned. Where Persians celebrated excess, Spartans embraced restraint. The Persians came wrapped in gold. The Spartans came covered in scars. Which meal builds the better warrior? That's a question history already answered, not in a cookbook, but on the bloodied cliffs of Thermopylae. The Spartans stood. The Persians bled. And while Xerxes sat beneath a jeweled canopy, Leonidas stood his ground, bones aching, stomach empty, but unbreakable. So ask yourself, do you want to dine like a king? Or endure like a legend? So now you know the black broth wasn't just a Spartan dish. It was a mindset, a weapon, a way of life forged in the fires of discipline and desperation. While the Persians feasted, Spartans fasted and fought. Their meals were misery in a bowl, yet somehow they carved their names into eternity. But here's the twist. The Spartans weren't the only warriors who turned their stomachs into weapons. Because while Leonidas made a stand at the hot gates, another storm was brewing in the east. A storm of hooves, of meat dried on saddles, of fermented mare's milk, of warriors who didn't just march, they devoured nations. Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire, they didn't cook in kitchens. They cooked on the move, in war, in the dust, feeding an army that conquered half the known world. And what they ate would make even a Spartan gag. You thought Melas Zomos was brutal? Watch next and meet the Mongols' battlefield jerky.